Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya, and welcome to another episode of TFI Let's Talk, or it's like rap. We used to do the raps, right, together with you. And today we have with us once again Rob Hirschfeld, co-founder and CEO of RackN. Rob, it's great to see you again.
Thank you. It's exciting to be here and be in person at such an amazing event.
Tell us a bit about, first of all, what major announcement that you heard that caught your attention. They're like, hey, this is something impressive.
I think that the community engagement, and this is a bit of a pro and con. There is no doubt that Kubernetes has entrenched itself as the dominant enterprise platform for container management. And it has this enormous number of projects and ecosystem and all these other pieces and parts. And so a lot of what we see from an announcement perspective is just how big all of those pieces have gotten, right? And how much stuff is going on. At the same time, I think a lot of people are realizing just how hard it is to navigate all of those things. I was joking with somebody who we were talking about the first KubeCon, which was 200 people. There are more vendors here, more sponsors at this event than there were attendees at the first event. And that's a challenge from that perspective.
So do you think there is a disbalance in the vendor community and the users community, or is that natural for a community like this?
I think we're still trying to find that out. Without a doubt, I'm walking around the show and talking to users, which is really exciting. A fair number of users. So I don't feel like this is vendors talking to vendors, and that's important. There are a lot of vendors here, but that's not bad. It's a healthy ecosystem from that perspective.
And as you talk to these users, are you also hearing some pain points? What are you hearing from them?
A lot of people are still in discovery and migration and initial deployment. So while it is definitely a component of how the systems are being built, we aren't hitting the day two, the scale, the operations pieces to the same extent that we will need to.
I talk to a lot of folks when it comes to Kubernetes or CNCF ecosystem and complexity. The discovery and the navigating, that does become a big challenge. Big companies, they can handle it, but there are a lot. Kubernetes is just like Linux kernel. Everybody using it. So there are a lot of smaller companies, they do want to consume it, but it becomes a bigger challenge for them.
It's interesting because even big companies have the challenge of individual teams making different decisions, and they're going to have to wrangle and pull things back and figure out how to actually build this. And so we are going to see generations of, oh, I made these decisions, or I'm using this version of a project, and I want to switch, or the corporate standard is something different. And we will see that. I think that this is what I would say is the last easy Kubernetes conference, in that the users, there are definitely users showing up, there are production workloads, it's very real. And at the same time, the challenges of next generation, oh, I've been running this for 2 years and all of the operators I built into it are out of date, or the version of Kubernetes is out of date, or I have to patch or manage or figure out the costs all of a sudden. Those enterprise problems, the enterprise users are here, the enterprise opportunity is here, the enterprise challenges haven't yet shown up. And you don't see talks about that as much yet.
If you remember before COVID happened, KubeCon, we start seeing a lot of focus on security. So like in the cloud native CNCF world, security should not be an afterthought. It should not be, someone else's problem. What are the themes that you're seeing now?
So the thing that I'm really fascinated to see at this show is the prevalence of the CRD and operator design pattern. And let me explain that for people who aren't deep in the weeds of Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is declarative, meaning when you want to use Kubernetes, you ask it for the state that it wants to be, and then Kubernetes is responsible for getting to that state. And that's the fundamental design for the container management. But Kubernetes also allows you to define custom resource definitions, or CRDs, where you can say, oh, I have a service or a thing that I want to manage. And in the Kubernetes paradigm, which is what people are talking about here, so Kubernetes is teaching us how to manage infrastructure, manage applications. And we do that in this declarative way. And so people are adding these CRDs into Kubernetes. It's a very popular pattern here to manage things. And then they build what's called an operator, or a service behind that CRD that watches for when it changes and then does that work. And so there's a lot of stuff, a lot of sessions, a lot of discussion, a lot of vendors who are basically building these CRD enablement systems. And in doing that, they're actually creating, it's a whole new use case for Kubernetes that it wasn't initially architected for. And so we're going to have to get into a whole management discussion of how do I manage all these CRDs? How do I improve the performance of the CRDs? How do I back them up and scale them and version? It's a whole management side of Kubernetes that really wasn't designed in from the ground up, because it was something that evolved as a need. And that's exactly what you want. The project is evolving. The evidence of all these CRD sessions and the interest in operators and the discussions about it is an evidence that the project is doing exactly what it needs to do, which is figure out how it's going to be. But those are going to be growing pains that we're going to have to hit in the next generation.
But are you seeing any sessions, talks, or remember there used to be days dedicated to security. So what are you seeing,
In the community here, CRDs are a dominant topic. So what we see is days before the session are set up, where we're talking about either projects that use CRDs or how to build CRDs. I went to several sessions that were just talking about a special use case for CRDs called the cluster API that most people would never need to build, but uses CRDs. And so people are interested in, let me see the machinery behind these sessions. And so we really do see a lot of discussion and sessions teaching people how to use this pattern. I went to a session where Amazon built a code generator because they have to build 200 of these patterns to map in all of their infrastructure. And so it was really fascinating for them to really express very clearly, our communities want to manage infrastructure this way, in this pattern that is very much about how Kubernetes thinks about things, like cloud native thinking. And so it's been really interesting to see it manifest, as you're saying, in sessions, on the floor, in pre-days, in conversations I'm having, in just what vendors are like, we have CRDs to do this. And if you don't know what a CRD is, it's going to sound really weird. And anybody who's thinking about Kubernetes today needs to also understand that's a big part of the pattern. And that's a big takeaway for me.
One more discussion that we are hearing a lot these days is platform engineers. It's a DevOps is that, platform. What are you seeing here?
So platform engineering has not captured a lot of discussion directly. I think that we haven't seen people just assume that platform engineering is Kubernetes, which I think is a relief, because I think platform engineering is going to be a lot more than just Kubernetes. And it's interesting. There's a little bit of back and forth on DevOps versus platform engineering, or SRE versus platform engineering outside of the conference. What I don't see a lot of is people looking and using DevOps, SRE, or platform engineering as the conversation piece. And I think that might be an important thing to note as a gap. We aren't talking about DevOps and Kubernetes, or how to platform manage Kubernetes as much, either because I think maybe people assume the clouds are going to do it for them, or they're going to get a SaaS to do it. But in some ways, we're not there as much, right? The lack of operator discussions and how do I operate Kubernetes, and what things do I have to worry about for my DevOps infrastructure, or how do I build my platform team, improve Kubernetes or make Kubernetes more palatable. Those aren't the topics yet. And I think that as an enterprise looks at Kubernetes, they need those topics. That's what's missing. And it's worth noting there's a lag in how topics are selected for a conference like this, right? They get decided 6 months in advance, and at that point it's going to be a lot of vendors and the vendor projects. So the conference sessions are very inside baseball. Right? How do I do Kubernetes? How do I write Kubernetes? How do I build components in Kubernetes? They aren't the operators showing up and saying, this is how I run Kubernetes. This is how I've done that work. I'm hoping in the next a year from now that we'll have had those sessions coming in, and we'll have people spending more time talking about their operational experience and their business benefit and impact. And that would actually change the tenor of the conference, I think, in a very productive way.
Rob, thank you so much for taking time out today, and once again, do this wrap. I wish we could do this wrap on regular basis as we used to do, but it's really good to see you again, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
I appreciate it, Swap. Thank you.